This is chapter 35, section 4. This is the senses and how it relates to the central nervous system. A very important part to all organisms, all animal organisms that have sensory receptors and sensory organs. And you're familiar with this. You use these every single day and you don't think much of it, but this is very, very important for your survival. It's very important for other animal survival as well. And this allows organisms to respond to external stimuli as well as internal stimuli and enables them to survive accordingly. So it enables organisms to run from predators and also be predators. And there's other things as well, but just that's a good example of why sensory organs and our senses are important. This is important vocabulary. Key concepts. So getting started right away, sensory receptors, these are nerve cells, these are neurons, and they respond to specific stimulus, right? Really specific. So each one does a very specific job or signal to the brain, and depending on its job, it may respond to light or sound or movement or whatever, and it's going to send an impulse to the brain, the central nervous system, and then your brain's going to interpret that signal, whatever it might be. It's going to interpret it and give you a perception of what's going on. So anyways, there's 5 general categories of sensory receptors. And so we have pain receptors. This is located all over your body, all over your skin, internally as well. You have pain receptors. The only place you don't have pain receptors is your brain, oddly enough. And so you have it on the outside of your skull, but not on or in your brain. And so pain receptors are going to tell you whether you have some sort of injury externally or internally, some disease, whatever. Thermoreceptors are basically taking your temperature both internally and externally all the time. These are concentrated in your hypothalamus, but also all over your skin. So this is a very important type of receptors to give your brain an idea of what your body temperature is doing. Mechanoreceptors, most of them except for photoreceptors are all over your body, but these are all over your body, but one we'll focus on is in your inner ear, and this is going to give you the sense of balance. It's also going to enable you to hear things. Chemoreceptors are receptors that are located primarily in your nose and your taste buds, and so they're going to respond to specific chemicals that are released in your mouth or in your nose, and it's going to give you a perception of taste or smell. And then photoreceptors are only in your eyeball, and this is going to enable you to see, and we're going to do some fun little activities with photoreceptors. So we're not going to spend more time on this. I can talk a lot about this, but here's basically essentially evolution of the eye in complexity. And so you start off with just some photoreceptors in a flat arrangement. All they can detect is whether light is there or not. Then you get what they call pigment cup. This enables organism to sort of see the direction of where the light's coming from, so presence of light or not, but now your brain can interpret from what direction. And then as it continues, where you get a deeper cup and this sort of closes up, now you can start to see an image, but a very blurry image. What you need to see a very clear image is a lens, and so we see what we call pinhole lens here for the nautilus. We can talk more about this. But then as we get in other organisms like a marine snail, we now have light being able to go through a very simple lens and get a clearer image, a much clearer image. And then when we get to something like an octopus or a human or a cat or whatever, now you have a more solid lens that is attached to muscles that now can pull it back and forth in order to focus an image. So the light comes in and it can now focus an image. And so an octopus in particular has great eyesight, and so do you, and so do most of you. And so this is sort of the complexity of eyes that we see animal kingdom. We'll talk a whole lot more about this. So here's your eye. This is not the diagram that I want you to know. I want you to know figure 35-13 on page 907. You need to know that, but this is the best figure I could find. A few things just to point out. First of all, you have 6 eye muscles, and this rotates your eyes around and around. Very important. Some organisms have fixed eyes, so they can't actually move their eyes without turning their heads. And so this is a really great advantage we have is these muscles along the eyes to spin our eye all the way around. So let's just start at the cornea. And so there's a clear sort of thin area of the eye on the outer eye called the cornea. This allows light to come in. You have what's called, you have an opening, so it's not an actual structure, an opening, and you'll see it in the book called the pupil. And that's just an opening, and it changes in size due to this muscle called the iris. So the color of your eye, whether it's brown, green, blue, whatever, the color of your eye is from the iris. It's from the iris, and it's a muscle, and these circular muscles sort of tighten the pupil or make it smaller or make it bigger. And so we'll talk more about that and actually do a little demonstration with that later. Beyond the iris and the pupil is a structure called the lens. This is what's going to enable you to focus and it's a hard structure, much like in your eye, it's much like a skittle actually, and much harder than a skittle. And so it's a hard structure that allows light to pass through, and there's muscles that attach to it, enable to move it back or forth to focus depending on what the distance of the object that you're trying to focus on. So the light's going to come through all these structures, and then it's going to go through this big area that has a gel basically in it. And it's going to hit the back area of the eye, particularly in one sort of spot. This is where you're going to get your image. And in the back of the eye, in the retina, you have cone cells. I'll write this down here. Cone, these are very important cells. And you have rods. These are photoreceptors. And so they take light energy, and they're going to send a nerve impulse to the brain. So rods don't determine color. Only sort of they're very sensitive, but they don't determine color. Whereas cones, they determine color. And so those are the two types of photoreceptors you have in your retina within your eye. That's going to then send a nerve impulse along here out the optic nerve and to the back of your brain on either side, the occipital lobe, and this is where you're going to interpret that nerve impulse and then give you the perception of whatever you're seeing. We'll do some activities with this. We'll talk more about it because you have a blind spot, and we'll do an activity where there are all sorts of things. Anyways, you also have accessory organs like the eyelid. This closes the eye if something's coming towards it. The eyelid also moistens the eye. You close it and it keeps your eye nice and moist. And then you have eyelashes and eyebrows that sort of protect it from dust